So first of all, let me welcome you to this little session on college financing and some of both the opportunities and the potential pitfalls that a prospective student or their parents or whoever is helping with the financing of college education to help them understand what are the many options really that are available. And we've assembled a group of, I would consider them certainly experts. I think they consider themselves experts anyway, in the field of college financing, and so I'm very happy that they could join us today. I think the goal and the theme behind what we've been doing, we did a similar session last spring in Oxford for the communities in the area, but we really want to leave no college applicant behind as far as if they're qualified for admission to a college or a particular college or any number of colleges, that we want to try to make sure that the resources are available there to help them through that. Because if they've worked hard and gotten the good grades and they've gotten themselves involved in school activities and community service and they get reasonably decent scores or whatever the score the colleges are looking for in the SATs or other kinds of entrance exams, then the next step is how do we pay for it? And it's interesting, I think, that I'm a trustee of Nichols College, so I've got some experience with that, and I've also been an administrator at a couple of private colleges and universities. And when you look at the tuition charges on a private or an independent college, it looks pretty imposing, although I think you have to understand that those are the published price, and there's a lot of negotiation in a way in between in the form of grants and aid and scholarships and other kinds of assistance that we'll talk a little bit about tonight. And then the public colleges, the University of Massachusetts and the State University system, the community college system, while the tuitions have been traditionally lower, they've kind of crept up a little bit over the last decade as we've had a combination of the economy not providing the kind of budgets that we need, the revenue we need to fund those budgets, and also over the last decade there have been a number of tax cuts enacted at the state level that have taken a total of about $3 billion out of what would have been if those hadn't been passed. So when budgets have been cut, the legislature and the governors have tended to say, well, the colleges have another way to raise money. They can do it through the tuition and fees. So other agencies that don't have that opportunity are not as favorable position. However, it does shift the burden to the students and to their families, either immediately or certainly over a period of time on the financing end of it. So it's still it is a hurdle, but not necessarily an insurmountable hurdle for people who are aware of what the benefits are and the opportunities. And I think also understanding the expense side of that, of what the students and families need to know about what kind of things to do and prepare for. And we've got folks that are going to talk a little bit about financial literacy, basically, how to be trained to try to make what you're going to be spending your money on mean something and be for what's really important. So with several speakers that we will hear from this evening. Julie Shields-Rotina is the Director of Early College Planning with the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. I was going to say Facilities Authority. It's another authority, but the Financing Authority. And Julie is going to talk a little bit about what that authority is and how it can be of benefit to families and the students. Paul Linsky, who's the Executive Director of the Blackstone Valley Educational Foundation, has also been involved with the Financing Authority. So if Julie forgets something, Paul's ready to jump in and remind him.
The other way around.
So one way or another, we've got can either double team that effort. Jonathan Sparling's with the American Student Assistance Program, and he's going to talk a little bit more about kind of the financial literacy and all those wonderful credit card offers that come in and how to avoid them in most cases. To try to avoid some of the pitfalls for people who can get into trouble very easily and unwittingly in many cases, because it looks like free money in some cases, but as everybody knows that's ever used a credit card, it's not free, and it does add up. Julie's going to come back a little bit after that and talk a little bit about the 529 plans, which maybe you've never heard of, but they are another way of helping to finance college education. And then Dan Tenori is going to talk also about the 529 and some other aspects of planning for and preparing for college. So we think we've got a pretty broad-based team here to cover just about any questions that you might have. So what we'll do, because I think we've got a relatively cozy group here, that we can take some questions. We'll take 2 or 3 questions after each speaker, and then if there are other questions that come to mind, if you heard everybody, that's fine too. So if you have some questions you want to ask, and then if you, at the end of the program, if you have questions you'd rather ask privately to any of them, feel free to do that as well. So I think hopefully we'll cover as many of the points that you have, and since we're filming this for Milford Cable TV, there'll be others that will be watching this, and so hopefully you can ask some of the questions that they might think of sitting at home looking at this program. So let's start with Julie and talk a little about the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority and some of the programs that are offered through the authority.
That's great. That's great.
I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Sire. Well, it's nice to be here with you tonight, and I will share that I have been working with families for about 25 years, and at this point I have a junior in high school, so all the kinds of advice and asking people to stay calm that I give to others, I need to keep my shoulders back and tell myself the same thing. So can I ask quickly, do you have high school, if you have, with a show of hands, high school students? A couple, okay, and then younger than high school?
And one in college.
Okay, great. So various ages, that's great. So I will tell you a little bit about MIFA, the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We have been around for 30 years. We're not-for-profit here in Massachusetts, and we have a couple of savings plans for parents, the U Plan and the U Fund, and we also have private loans for families who need that type of financing when students are in college. And then everything else we do is a free resource for families both here in Massachusetts and even families who send their children to Massachusetts colleges. So I'll leave you, I have a lot of information to share, but then I will just leave you with resources that you can use hopefully throughout the whole college process. And you know, at MIFA we talk a lot about college affordability, and we talk about that with the colleges and a lot with families. And I guess that's what becomes very important to us is how do families define affordability? And this, you can see this quote here from one of our families. The idea of college affordability is overwhelming. You know, we hear about the high costs, and when you sit as a parent and start adding up, you know, the high cost of a private education times 4 years, times how many children, it can almost seem paralyzing. And so what I really like to share is that I want to give you some balanced ways to think about that, because we do work with really thousands of families, and we watch how families piece that together, and that's what we hope that you can do, take it in smaller pieces. So as a service, and hopefully you can take advantage of more of this, MIFA does go out and we do presentations all over the state throughout the course of the year. We do over 500 of them. A lot of them are about the financial aid process that we do really starting at this time of year in a lot of high schools. But we also do sessions on college admissions, early college planning, and we do a session in the spring for parents of seniors about how to pay that college bill, which has become a very important session. So I'm going to leave you with information on our website and all of that, and you can find all of those seminars at any point to help you through the process. And the types of things we talk about in these financial aid seminars are really to give you a more balanced view of those costs. And one important piece that I want families to keep in mind when you're thinking about those high costs and feeling overwhelmed is there is a lot of financial aid that is awarded to students each year. So if you look at the middle part of that busy graph, you will see that what that's saying is that $185 billion of financial aid was awarded to students last year. And that aid comes in many forms. So you can see that there are some federal Pell Grants, there are some student loans, some work study, some tax credits. There's college and university financial aid as well. And so as when your student is a senior, you'll apply for financial aid, help them apply for financial aid, and you'll be applying for financial aid from all of these different sources with one process. And here are all the different sources. So the federal government has a very large source of the aid. The state also has some financial aid. And then the colleges and universities themselves put together their own scholarship programs and have scholarships and grants also to award. When you apply for financial aid through the process that I'm going to describe, you're really applying for all of the aid available to this line. And then this aid from outside or private agencies is its own separate process. So that's the only separate process where you would go and you could search for some outside private sources, such as your employers, the high schools, maybe a Rotary Club, Elks Clubs, things like that. The story that I like to tell is I walked into my dentist office the other day and saw that she gives out 2 scholarships to 2 good community servants each year. So that's a place I never would have thought to look. So just keep your eyes open for anything like that. And then just briefly, you can find a lot more about this on our website and the details, but the way that you apply for financial aid is you should complete the FAFSA. That's the free application for federal student aid, and it's a form of the federal government. You complete it every year that the student is in college and applying for financial aid, and you do that online at the FAFSA.gov website. And that form asks a lot of questions about your income, your assets, your student income assets, the size of your family, how many students in college, all of that. And that then is the way you apply for all of those sources of financial aid. And all colleges require that. The other form that's required by some colleges is this CSS profile form. And so some private colleges that have a lot of their own private scholarship and grant money to award feel that the federal form doesn't always ask enough questions for them to make some of those determinations about their own institutional scholarship programs and grant programs. So they have families also complete this profile form. So the key will be, when you get to that point, looking at the different colleges that your son or daughter is applying to and finding out what applications are required for financial aid and then completing all of those and paying attention to deadlines, making sure you do them on time. And so that's what you'll do. Now, I'm just going to leave you in this first part of my presentation with 3 resources that I think will be helpful at different stages of the process. This is a free web portal that is sponsored by the state and MIFA, and it's called Your Plan for the Future. And you can go online, yourplanforthefuture.org. And this is chock full of help for students. So students can go into this portal and can take some skills assessments, some interest assessments, personality tests, find out things that they might be interested in, that they're good at, and then they can go to some next levels. They will receive information about some jobs and careers that might be a good match for them, and they can dig down deeper and find out what the day-to-day life in a certain job is like. You know, do you work evenings, do you work weekends, what's the salary, all of those things. Then you can go further and find out what colleges have programs that would lead you into those careers, and it's a wealth of information. Some high schools use this as their high school system, and others don't. But even if your high school doesn't use it, you can still use it on your own, and your student can use it. And there's just great information. One little tool that I really like is, once they really figure out some colleges they might like to apply to and how much it might cost, and then what the salary might be of their future job, they can press a button and it does a little calculation, and it will show them if they go to college, this certain college, maybe take out these loans, graduate, get this job with this salary, what their future life might be. And it shows a steak, a piece of pizza, and a can of beans, to give them a sense of what your life might look like. Trying to really reinforce for students that it's hard, they're young, but there are so many decisions, and the more forward-thinking they can be about making that plan, the better off. So lots of good information in here. And then the second resource is the MIFA website, which really is terrific. I would say that up in the right-hand corner, you can see right on MIFA.org, there's a little place to sign up for MIFA emails. And you just tell us your email, and then you tell us the ages of your children. And we will send you targeted emails targeted to what they need to be doing at certain points. So junior year, it will be a lot of information about admissions. Senior year, about financial aid. When they're younger, things like picking classes and extracurricular activities and saving and all of that. So that's helpful. And then just to know, there's a lot of information on the website, but if you have questions all the way through the process, you can email an expert, call our office. We work with a lot of families and want to help you through the entire process. So you use us, use that. And then the last resource, the third one, is just that when you're completing the FAFSA senior year, if you would like help completing the FAFSA, we have a program in Massachusetts called FAFSA Day, and it's held during a couple of days in the winter. And you can just go to this FAFSAday.org website and find out if there's one close to you. There probably is. And you can go that day, bring your paperwork, and actually have financial aid officers from different colleges help and sit there, and you can get your whole financial aid application done on that day. So I think that's helpful. Yeah. Yes. No. Free. So everything that I just described is free resources. Thank you. And I get a lot of questions that I know I've heard recently that a lot of families, because they're nervous and anxious about this whole process, are paying for some of these services. And I understand, people make decisions, but that's why I really like to just get the word out that there are a lot of free services for people to take advantage of. And so I would start with that.
And
So,
Julie,
yes.
The FAFSA, I don't think you can even fill that out until after January 1st. There's some date at the beginning of the year.
I'm glad you said that. So it is January 1st. Exactly.
So that you can go online, but it'll say, come back later.
Exactly. And the profile, I think it's set it up here and I didn't say it. The profile is actually available in October for those families who want to do a student's early decision or all of that. So you can do that one a little bit earlier. All right, and I think I'm going to turn it to Paul.
Thank you. We got it. Well, good evening, and thanks for coming tonight. Can everybody hear that okay? All right. Feel free to interrupt me, actually, with any questions as I get to the slides about financial aid, just because some of them will have numbers on them, and while they're in front of us, I'd rather answer your questions at that point. So just stick a hand up in the air, I'll stop talking, and we'll go directly to the question. The Blackstone Valley Education Foundation works with the school districts throughout the valley to provide services on career planning and college planning for the schools. And for anyone here from Milford or those of you who are watching at home, I'd like to welcome you because the Milford Public Schools is our newest member this year. Thanks to Superintendent Bob Tremblay. He right away was very interested in getting the school system in. We'll be doing a lot with the Milford Public Schools this year. If you have students at Stacy Middle School, see your teachers or principals in the next week or two about the big STEM program we do at the Tufts Veterinary School next month. And if you're at the high school, see one of your guidance counselors. I was just there meeting with your guidance staff last week about the Student Leadership Conference we have coming up. So those are the two pending activities that are brand new this year for Milford Public School families. And we have many, many more coming, but in the interest of time, I won't go through the entire year, obviously. And I want to emphasize what Julie said. If there's nothing else you do in financial aid, get to one of the MIFA sessions at your schools. They start this month, they run through January. They're the most important resource you have in the state to learn about financial aid. If you can't make the one at your school, you can go on the website Julie showed you and find one at one of the other local schools. Certainly feel free to do that. I'll be doing a presentation for the seniors and the parents at Uxbridge High School tomorrow night, and I will direct them from my session to make sure they go to the Uxbridge High School MIFA session too. So that's a very, very strong resource. A couple quick things. When you're getting into the process about selecting the schools, costs will be a factor for many families. There's no question about that. Make sure it's not the only factor, because as we're all going to indicate, there is a substantial amount of financial aid coming from federal sources, state sources, and most importantly from the schools themselves. So consider things like majors, proximity to home, size of school that you're looking for, academic reputation, but make sure that you don't eliminate any school simply because of what the sticker price is, because many, many families, well over 50%, are getting financial aid, and that sticker price is rarely paid as a full price. So don't let that stand in the way of selecting a school. There are two types of ways to give out financial aid, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about these two. The first one, need-based aid, is what we're talking about tonight. It's money given to a family based on the family's financial situation. Julie mentioned the two primary forms, the FAFSA and the profile. It's possible the college may have an additional form. More than likely, they're just using one of those two. As she said, the FAFSA is required everywhere, and as Senator Moore pointed out, starting after January 1st, you should be online filling that out. So need-based aid will be coming based on the family's ability to pay. The second one, merit-based or non-need-based aid, actually can have a substantial impact on what the family gets. Merit-based aid is sometimes called scholarships, and it's a term you all use. So merit-based aid is usually based on something other than financial need. It could be academics, it could be leadership, it could be athletics, it could be any number of things. But you want to find out from the schools the student is going to be looking at. We can assume they all do the first one on the screen, need-based, but you want to find out if they do the second one on the screen, because it's usually an entirely different process. It usually has nothing to do with the FAFSA or the profile. So you want to very much look into that process, especially the academics. Students, especially when they're younger, think, I'm going to get an athletic scholarship, athletic scholarship. Athletic scholarships are extremely competitive to get, extremely competitive. Tell them to go after the good grades. The academic ones are substantially more available than the athletic ones. As a general rule, if a student is applying to a college, and this is an important statement to try to keep in the back of your mind, the more likely they are to get accepted at the school, the more likely they are to get a merit scholarship. You got to let that sink in for a minute. If this is an A- student applying to a college that traditionally accepts B+ students, he or she is a very strong candidate for merit scholarships at that school, if they give merit scholarships. If the student is the reverse of that, a B or B+ student applying to a school that traditionally takes A- students, they may get accepted for admissions, but they're no longer a strong candidate for merit scholarships. Why? Because the merit scholarships tend to go to the students closer to the top of the academic pool at that particular school. So it's not necessarily the grades you have that determine whether you're going to get the merit scholarship. It's how those grades compare to the others in the applicant pool at that school. If you're a B+ student and you're applying to a school that traditionally accepts B or B- students, you're a very strong candidate with your B+ at that school. So understand how this works as far as the merit aid and the differences with the need-based. Any questions about that? Because I know it's complex. Okay. Let's look at the reality of gapping, as I call it. Your financial need when you apply will be determined by a number that will be assigned to the student. And that number is called their EFC, their expected family contribution. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it right now. But that number is a baseline number, and the same number, whatever it is, gets sent to every college in the country the student is applying to, regardless of the cost of that school. Basically what it comes down to is, if your EFC is lower than the cost of the college, there's a chance you can get financial aid. If it's equal to or higher than the cost of the college, you're probably not going to get need-based financial aid, because your EFC is your first dollar in. So that needs to be paid as a minimum contribution from the family before financial aid even kicks in. So let's take two different colleges, A and B here, 1 and 2 we're calling them. Let's just hypothetically say they each cost $25,000. Let's say your family EFC is $6,000. That's a number I pulled out of nowhere. It's not an average, it's not a median, it's just a number. If you go to college A, college 1, 25,000 minus 6,000 means the student's eligible for 19,000. If you go to college 2, same formula. Students eligible for 19,000. College 1 may give that student 19,000, which means the only balance due is what you originally knew going in your EFC. But college 2 may give the student only 16,000 or 6,000 or 10,000 or any number they want. So just because the student is eligible for a certain amount, it doesn't necessarily mean the college gives them that amount. And that's a really important concept. In fact, about 90+% of the colleges in the country do not meet full need for all of their students. So when you get that EFC, it's usually not the maximum the family needs to pay, it's usually the minimum. And Senator Moore made a very good point. Even though the FAFSA can't be filed until January 1st, he's correct. Go to the website tonight or tomorrow or next week, because you can run some preliminary numbers to get at least a rough indication about what your EFC is going to be, and just estimate. I mean, don't pull out your taxes. You know, I earned about how much money, I got about how many kids, I mean, you know, whatever you want. And you can actually see what your EFC is likely going to be when you come to filling it out in January. And this is usually a much higher number than most of us parents tend to expect. So it's well worth looking at in advance. But gapping is the difference between what the student was eligible for and what the college actually gave them. Any questions about that?
Well, what if circumstances change?
Oh, that's
If you file the FAFSA, you know, we've had people get laid off, or they, these days, furloughed, or maybe they had to take a job that paid less, and they've already filed their FAFSA.
Excellent point. Let's assume a senior in high school this year. Financial aid is based on your FAFSA numbers from the year prior to when you're going to enter college. So for a senior in high school, the family will be filling out the FAFSA in January for the 2013 income numbers, the year before they enter high school. That's why FAFSA begins on January 1st, because the year's over. So we're not guessing how much we made. I mean, it's already happened. So the senator's point is really important. Since you're filling out information in January, a full 9 months before the student even begins in college, and you're talking about income that took place a full year before the student even begins college, if anything changes, including the examples he just gave, you know, drop in income, laid off, whatever, the school can absolutely readjust that number, even after they've already started freshman year in college. So the information he just asked about is critical. Technically, the deadline for a student entering college in September of 2014, the deadline for the FAFSA to be completed is June of 2015. So during the entire freshman year of college, right up till the end of freshman year, the college can readjust their financial aid retroactively back to September if the extenuating circumstances hit. So it's really important what he just said about the communication with the college. Other questions? Okay. Let's say you've got a balance of the bill to pay, and I'm going to use a number $9,000. And again, that's just the number. Some of you are going to have a balance that's a lot lower than that. Some may have a balance that's higher than that. It doesn't necessarily mean you're writing a $9,000 check, and that's good news for us parents. I just had 2 finish the college process, including overlap of 2 years. What we can do is we have 3 different options to help us pay that balance. We can use any assets we've accumulated, I'm calling them family savings, We can use paychecks that are coming into the family for either or both parents. We can borrow as a family, the loans Julie mentioned through MIFA. So if I've got a $9,000 balance, I'm not writing a $9,000 check. I'm going back to this screen. By the way, there's nothing I forgot to put on the screen. There's no D. These are the entire list of options for us. There is no D. So I'm going back to my $9,000 and I'm going to say, hypothetically, let me do a third in each of these. So I'm back to A. That means I got to come up with $3,000 cash. So I may say, all right, I'm going to meet that $9,000 by coming up with $1,500 cash for September and $1,500 cash for January. So my first third of that is going to be cash from somewhere. This is the same if it's 6,000, if it's 10, I mean, whatever the number is. Then let's say I'm going to use paychecks to pay the second 3,000. Most, if not all, colleges will allow you to do a tuition payment plan. It's almost always interest-free. It usually costs you 60 or 80 bucks to get in the plan. And you can divide any portion of that number that you want into 8, 9, or 10 equal payments monthly. So let's say I want to do my second 3,000 by setting up a $300 a month tuition payment plan for freshman year. So $1,500 and $1,500, $3,000 is coming from cash. I'm setting up a $300 monthly payment plan. Then I'm going to call MIFA and take out a $3,000 parent loan. If I don't want to borrow any money, A and B need to add up to $9,000 in some combination. If I've got nothing saved for college, B and C need to add up to $9,000 in some combination. Everybody seeing this? But this is really, really important. And this is the flexibility that we do have. And the schools will work with you on giving you advice like this, but the MIFA Financial Aid Night will also cover in pretty good detail. Any questions about this? Okay. I had a schedule. Who am I turning it over to now? Jonathan, okay.
So let me fix the computer.
All right, thanks, and I'll be here afterwards also, as the senator said, if you have any individual questions. You're on.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Oh, thank you for switching this over. Perfect. So my name is Jonathan Sparling, and as the senator said, I work for American Student Assistance. We are a nonprofit agency. We've been around for a little over 50 years. And for most of our existence, we were a student loan guarantor agency, which basically means we worked very closely with federal student loan lenders, those giving out the money, and the servicers, those collecting the money. And as a guarantor agency, we were responsible for working with those agencies, but also with students to make sure that they were repaying their student loans on time, after graduation. In recent years, legislation changes have gone into effect and forced us to kind of change gears. And we knew that we were always dedicated to student success and to making sure that students could get through college and after, and be healthy and contributing members of society, making sure that there weren't too many barriers for them and working with them to make sure that they could succeed. And so we developed a financial literacy program. It's called SALT. I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. But really, it's a comprehensive literacy program. It's web-based, and it's aimed towards college students and young alumni. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight are some financial literacy tips for college-bound students, and really that's what we're about. Not only making sure that students are borrowing appropriately and aware of their options, but also kind of those other things that come along with it, some of that financial literacy. So what is financial literacy? The President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy defined it as the ability to use knowledge and skills to manage financial resources effectively for a lifetime of financial well-being. So we know that, pretty straightforward, so we know that college is a great time to work with students and to make sure that they're more aware of their finances, how to create a spending plan, what credit is, and things like that. Ideally, they would be learning about this before, and a lot of them are, but we know that for many students, college may be the first time that they're away from home. And so maybe they have to make more independent financial decisions. They are taking out those federal student loans, and those are actually their student loans. They are the ones signing those promissory notes. So these are all really important milestones for a lot of students, and we know that because of that, financial literacy is very important, and what better time to educate students. So again, why is financial literacy important? For all of those reasons, but also just some recent happenings and kind of what we see with student loans specifically. So in 2011, college graduates carried an average of $26,600 in student loan debt. Recently, the most recent figures, I've seen that number has gone up. And so again, this number is steadily rising. Now that's on average, so we have some students graduating with none, obviously some students graduating with a lot more. But again, there is that concern there with this average student loan debt continuing to go up. Outstanding student loan debt has now surpassed credit card debt. I'm sure all of you have heard about this, but from a consumer standpoint, that's something that's very, very important, and that's something that's we need to be aware of, and making sure that students are making smart financial decisions when they're in school, and making sure that they're not overborrowing, or that they're borrowing for the right reasons, for the right expenses, things like that. And in 2008, 84% of undergraduates had a credit card. So again, this stat is really shocking. Over 50% have 4 or more cards. Now this is in 2008, so it's a little outdated, and we know that recent research has shown that since that financial crisis, these numbers are trending downwards in terms of total number of credit cards, but still it's very important. Having a credit card is not just a revolving line of credit and just an endless amount of money that you can take out. And we want to make sure that students are aware of that and understand the importance of kind of having that credit card. So 5 tips for college-bound students. We're going to go through these not quickly, but they're kind of high level. They kind of cover a lot of what everyone else in the room is talking about, but they're very, very important. And all of these tips and everything that I talk about is kind of emphasized and talked about more on this financial education product that we created that's free resource to parents and students. So 1, think long-term when selecting a college. We talked about the importance of not eliminating colleges based on price, based on that sticker price, and that's absolutely true. Before I was at American Student Assistance, I worked in the financial aid office at Worcester Polytech Institute. Very expensive school, sticker price-wise. But again, we saw a lot of students go there. We gave it a substantial amount of money in financial aid, scholarships, merit scholarships every year. So when some families looked at that sticker price, they maybe were thinking, oh, I can't afford it. But again, making sure that you do apply for financial aid and see what the financial aid office has to offer is very important. But when you do apply, apply to a balanced list of colleges based on cost. So again, although costs shouldn't be a deterrent, it still should be a consideration when you go into the college application process and when students are thinking about that. Plan for all years of enrollment. This is a really big one. I think a lot of times when we go through the college application process, students and families, we have tunnel vision, and we're just worried about that first year and getting in the door. And that's important. But it's also important to remember that we're not only thinking about this 1-year commitment, it's a 4-year commitment, maybe 5 or 6, depending on it. But again, all of those years. And then compare future salary potential borrowing amounts. So there's a host of resources that you can go on when looking at, and if students are thinking about certain majors in comparison to how much they're borrowing. So definitely think about that as well, kind of aligning your major with maybe how much you're taking on in student debt. Open a checking and savings account. Now, this is a very good piece of advice for a number of reasons, but again, it kind of teaches the students the importance of if they don't have their own checking and savings account now, they're going to have to be making more of those independent financial decisions. Now is a great time to do it. Now, before you do, definitely research your options and consider a host of things. Obviously, the interest rates on some of the savings and checking accounts is something that we might take into consideration, although they're pretty low right now. But also location and convenience, minimum balance requirements, any fees, services, and products, and then customer service as well. There's a lot of deals out there that banks will offer, a free checking account to students and things like that. Take advantage of those. Make sure that you're reading the fine print, but definitely look for those benefits out there, coupling it with kind of convenience and location and things like that. Watch out for the fees. This is a like I said, as you know, some of those free checking accounts for students, maybe it's free just for the first 6 months, and then there's fees that come in. So make sure you're reading all of the information when it comes to taking out those accounts. And then again, you know, when students are thinking about this, start saving from part-time or summer employment. So again, you know, there's a lot of parents here, so you're going to be relaying this message, and I hope that students are watching on TV. But that money that you earn over the summer, some of it should be used to pay for college, and maybe not just for spending. So start thinking about that, and start thinking about the importance of saving that money, those part-time jobs in the summer, and maybe even when you go into the school year, saving some of that money as well. Create a spending plan. This is very, very, very important, and this kind of gets to the root of financial literacy. You know, whenever we talk about financial literacy, the first step really, it's identifying your expenses and your income, but really it's creating the spending plan or creating a budget. Spending plan is the word we like to use now because it's better than budget, but it's basically the same thing. So definitely identify those expenses for students in particular: books and supplies, transportation, food, laundry, cell phone bill, things like that. Identify all sources of income: part-time job, any work-study jobs. Financial aid, we can consider that a source of income. For students that borrow, if you're quote-unquote over-borrowing and then taking a refund to pay for some of those discretionary expenses, those books, those transportation, those other costs, we can consider that a source of income. So definitely take that into account. Then we put it all together and just ask this very crucial question: do expenses exceed income? And if the answer is yes, well, then we need to do one of two things: either increase income or decrease expenses. You know, test it out. Make sure you track expenses as you go through, and then review each month. So again, as you're going through the spending plan, as you're transitioning into college, it's a perfect time to start doing this. The fourth tip: establish and maintain good credit. So credit is extremely important. It's not only important when you're you know, looking to eventually borrow future, you know, maybe a loan for a car or a mortgage, something like that. It can affect your interest rates, but even job opportunities. That's something now employers are pulling credit reports, and they're looking at, is this person that I'm about to hire, potentially offer employment to, creditworthy? And so that's very, very important to talk with students and to make them understand that not only do their decisions affect them short term, but especially when it comes to credit long term as well. Use credit wisely. The stat I showed you earlier about kind of the multiple credit cards that students take on, you know, that can get you into trouble. There's the store credit cards as well. You know, all these different things. And while credit cards themselves are not a bad idea, and they do help you establish credit, it is very important to monitor and make sure that you're not taking on too many credit cards, that you're paying your balance off at the end of each month, things like that. A line of credit is not income. This is very, very important. Just as we talked about before, it's very, very crucial to remember and to tell students and talk with them that just because they have a $5,000 limit does not mean that they need to spend $5,000, and nor should they unless an emergency came up. So just to be very aware of that. And again, you know, I think that there's a lot of awareness now. There's more awareness now. And just being, you know, thinking back when I was in college, there'd be a lot of credit card companies on campus and kind of soliciting students, and you don't see that anymore. But still, just to be aware of when you do have that credit card, you have that line of credit, you don't have to max it out. And then monitor credit reports and scores. So annualcreditreport.com is a great resource for students to utilize just to check your credit score. Once a year, check your credit report, make sure there's no black marks on it or any surprises. Great resource for students. And then the last one is monitor student loan borrowing. So a lot of what we're talking about tonight, in addition to grants and scholarships, some other things that fill in the gap are those student loans. So, you know, all students will be eligible to borrow Stafford loans, and for students going into their first year, those maximums are $5,500, typically split between $3,500 in a subsidized Stafford loan, $2,000 in an unsubsidized Stafford loan. Those limits do increase your sophomore and then junior and senior year. There's also the federal Perkins loan. But whatever loans you're taking out, definitely track your borrowing on an annual basis and make sure that you're borrowing only what you need to cover your expenses and then some wiggle room. We don't want to max out. Just because we have maximum ability, we can borrow X amount of dollars in our federal student loans, doesn't mean that we need to max them out. So definitely, and you'll understand that and be better prepared when you track on an annual basis. Look for ways to reduce borrowing. So we talked a lot about scholarships. It's very important. You know, are there some scholarships offered from the school, either merit or need-based, or some outside scholarships? There's a lot of great resources in your community. There's national scholarship, outside scholarship agencies that are looking to help students and provide money. Even if it's just a couple $100s here or there, they do tend to add up. They really can add up pretty quickly. So definitely encourage and talk with your students about looking for ways to kind of get additional scholarships. And then obviously prepare for life after graduation by learning about loan repayment options. So I won't go into those tonight because that is a 2-hour presentation in itself. But we do have some great resources and some information about those student loan repayment options. And like I said, just all topics related to financial literacy, budgeting, credit, credit scores, identity theft, things like that, on our website, which is saltmoney.org, and also our parent company, asa.org. So just some additional resources. Like I said, we created SALT, which is our financial education program aimed at helping students be better borrowers, be better, more financially prepared, just to be, have those resources available to learn a little bit about financial literacy and the things that are important to them. And we have a Facebook page, we have Twitter, and we also have a great blog where students talk kind of about their own money experiences and what they've done to make sure that they're kind of following all those tips that I just pointed out. So that's it for me. Any questions before I turn it back over to Julie? Okay, excellent.
Okay. And I will just say,
Absolutely. Do the handoff?
thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. And I just have a couple of things to share before I turn it over to Dan. But given all that we've heard, when we're out talking with parents, there's the cost, there's how do I pay the bill, there's the debt to worry about. And so because of that, I actually spend a lot of my time these days not so much talking with parents. I do talk with parents of seniors, but of taking that all the way around to the other end and trying to reach parents as early as, who have kids as early as birth, to really talk to them about, I know it sounds crazy to start thinking about college when your baby is born, but that the earlier parents can start thinking about that, the easier it makes, the process and the smoother it makes it. So I'll say that. And then just to share a couple of things, Fidelity does a study called the College Savings Indicator each year, and these are just a couple of findings that came out of that recent study in September. And this slide shows that parents now hope and expect to cover about 60% of their students' college costs. But the reality is, when looking at the data, they really are only on track to cover about 20% of that. So there is a gap there. Another reason we're pushing the savings. And these were just a few things that parents said, ways that they were getting around making college affordable. Some were asking a child to live at home, asking a child to pay some of the expenses from earnings or work part-time, maybe asking a child to go to a less expensive college. So these are just some strategies that parents are using. But what I find when I'm out talking with parents, because I talk a lot about financial aid, and I encourage everyone to apply for financial aid, be eligible for things that they're eligible for. This is the pushback I get from parents. These are the three main comments I hear. And in that Fidelity study, we heard the same thing. The number one comment I usually get from folks in an audience is, well, if I save for college, won't that just hurt me in the financial aid process? And so because that is in people's heads, that's a pervasive thought out there. I'm going to say it's a pervasive myth out there. I feel like it's dangerous because the unknown, what do we do when something's unknown? We just do nothing. And so that, I think, affects a lot of parents' thinking, and parents decide, well, I'm not going to save. I'm not sure how it will be counted, so I'll just avoid doing it. And that's where it can become a dangerous myth, I think. And I'm going to show you on the next slide the numbers there of why your savings will help you and not hurt you. But you can see up there, 59% of families in that Fidelity survey from a month ago believed that saving for college would hurt their chances of receiving financial aid. And then the second most common comment I hear from families is, well, you know, college is so expensive. You know, I can only save a little bit. What's my little $50 a month, $25 a month going to do? Maybe I shouldn't bother at all. And so I guess what I would say to that is it doesn't matter. Whatever you save, small amounts, larger amounts, any amount you save will be a help to you. And as Paul pointed out, when you get to that stage and you only have a few choices of how you're going to pay that bill, whatever savings you have will give you some flexibility. And the last one, you know, times are tough. I can't save. And I know that that is a reality for so many families. But what I will share is that at MIFA, we work with families of very varied incomes. And there are families that we work with that earn $20,000 and are still putting away a tiny bit in a savings account every month for their child and feeling very good about it, because at least they have this feeling of, I'm doing whatever I can, and we'll go through the process. But it puts a little control back in the family. And this is that slide that I just wanted to show you these numbers before I turn it over, of that myth that people are afraid if they save, it's going to hurt their chances of financial aid. So this shows 4 families, and they're all earning, well, the first family A is earning $40,000, and the other 3 are all earning $60,000. And then the second line shows their assets or their savings that go from 0, 30,000, 60,000. And that third line is that expected family contribution that Paul mentioned. So in the calculation, what that calculation says that the family can pay. So basically what you can see here is that with the income change between $40,000 and $60,000, that changes the expected family contribution for that family significantly. So with a $40,000 income, that family's expected to pay $231. With the $60,000 income, they're expected to pay $3,300. That's a big jump for families, for just that jump in income. But you can see between families B and C, with the same income and a big difference in assets, 0 to $30,000, there's actually no change whatsoever in that expected family contribution. So, and then, even with $60,000 in assets, there's just a small change in the expected family contribution. So when it comes time to paying that college bill, you would prefer to be family C or D and have some savings to make some decisions. And even if it means the expected family contribution goes up slightly. So there's my encouragement on the savings piece. And I think now, and this is just, I guess, our strategies for saving. We encourage families to save, early, often, have the children also save, and once an account is opened, you can ask for gifts and all of that to try to build those savings. And MIFA 2 is now, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and so do connect with MIFA on all of this. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Julie, just a quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned the income. Is that solely based on the income you made the prior year, or do they look back at certain years?
So that's a great question. It's mostly, I say mostly, based on the income that one prior year, because that's the information on the FAFSA. There are some colleges that use that profile form that I mentioned that may look back one prior year. They do ask some information of one one back. So if 2013 is the year, the profile form does ask a few questions about 2012. Some colleges use it, some colleges don't, but that's it. It would never go back past that. And mainly, for most colleges, it's just that one year prior to when you're completing the forms. Good. Do you want me to? Oh, it should be on the bottom. Oh, it's not. So you're right, it's right there.
Perfect. Oh, that's beautiful. Which button?
On the right.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dan Tenori, and I'm with Edward Jones. I've been with Edward Jones for just under 4 years now. I've been in the industry for quite a while, and the reason I got into the industry as a financial advisor is to help people reach their long-term financial goals. I've been a resident of Central Massachusetts my entire life, and for half of it, I've been putting kids through the school system. In fact, I have a 25-year-old who graduated from Worcester State College 2 years ago, a 24-year-old who graduated from Fitchburg State last year. I have a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, and they're both still very much in the system. So I've learned a few things. Much of what I'm going to discuss tonight has already been discussed, so there'll be some review material. Some of it will be supporting material, which is great. We just put this presentation together, so if I get stuck, bear with me. But I'll find the words, and there will be times where we pause to ask for any questions, okay? So, the first thing we do when we sit down with any investor is look at their financial goals long term. We can't know how we're going to get there unless we know where we are and where we need to be. So it starts with taking a good assessment, a fair and honest assessment of where we are right now. Second step is always, where would I like to be? And we need clear and measurable goals to get to where we need to be. Then we sit down and plan. Can I get there? And it needs to be realistic. Can I realistically get there? Can I get part of the way there? What can we do to ease the pain? How do I get there? Well, that's where the plan comes in. And then finally, how can I stay on track? Staying on track is very important, but it's not real time consuming. It's taking a good look, be it every 3 months, 6 months, annually. Let's make sure that what we're doing is appropriate and make adjustments as necessary. The importance of college, I think a lot of this would be redundant here because we've kind of reached most of these conclusions, but 90% of the fastest growing jobs in the future will require some post-secondary education or training. There is a lot of global competition for these jobs, and obviously there is higher earnings potential. Most of the numbers that we come up with are from the U.S. Department of Labor. So we'll get right to it. What does it cost to go to college? Using today's numbers, your average community college, a little more than $10,000 per year. Public university in-state, approximately $17,900 is the U.S. average. That's eerily close to the state of Massachusetts, trust me. Private university, on average, $39,500. But what will that cost be in 10 years? In the 10-year cost, you'll see cost in 10 years, there's a little 2 there. It assumes that the cost is going to increase 5% annually. That's a pretty accurate historical representation, and as a financial advisor, I am compelled to say past performance is not a guarantee of future results, but guess what? It's pretty close. What will be that cost in 18 years? Well, there we go, using the same extrapolations. So, financial aid has been the primary topic here. Many sources, and I believe Julie mentioned earlier, approximately $1.85 billion in financial aid was given out last year. So this chart is eerily familiar. It's just full size. And then you have your budget to consider, because there are many items pulling on your budget. Taxes, health insurance, college, vacation, retirement, house payment, car payment, savings. Some of them you would see as optional, some of them you would see as mandatory. But the point is there are an awful lot of draws on
your budget. So how do we sift through it? How do we make it happen? Saving strategies. I think there are 3 that are very important, and we're going to dig immediately into 3 crucial saving strategies right now. And the first one is start right now. Start today. Somebody mentioned earlier $25 a month as a good starting point. I think that's a real easy number. Having 2 students who have just completed the system, they have an awful lot of friends who have just completed the system as well. Some of them have already had kids of their own, including my oldest. Where do we start? The Starbucks money? I mean, that's a phrase that we hear often. The $25 or so a month that the student was spending when they were in school getting caffeinated so they didn't fall asleep in class. Okay, perfect. If you start with something like that, and it's a good measuring stick, but is it a couple? $50 a month? If you start with $50 a month over the course of 18 years, you can see it accumulates a little more than $21,000. Is it a help? Absolutely. Does it solve all the problems? Not necessarily. But it's a big step in the right direction without spending an awful lot of money. I would tell you that even if you start late, because a lot of people come to me and say, yeah, but my student's 13 years old. What am I going to do? If you have a 13-year-old, you can still make a significant impact on their college savings. With $200 a month, assuming normal market conditions or average market conditions, and yes, even over the course of 2008, 2009, the market has seen ordinary market conditions. $200 a month saved for 5 years, compounding, generates a little more than $14,000 in savings. So it can be done. It takes some discipline, it takes some planning, and it takes realistic and achievable goals. But the most important step is start today, because starting today with $50 a month is a whole lot easier than waiting a decade and starting with $200 a month. Invest regularly. Consistency is one of the most important lessons that I have. Choose a manageable amount. Consider help from family and friends, because anybody can gift to anybody else up to $14,000 a year tax-free. And that's per beneficiary. So a grandparent with 2 grandchildren can give each grandchild $14,000. Contribute unneeded required minimum distributions. If you have a young child, you're trying to save for college, I don't know any grandparent in the world who wouldn't like to help. When somebody reaches the age of 70 1/2, the government forces a required minimum distribution from their retirement savings. Oftentimes, they have no need for that money, but they have to take it out of their IRA. What do they do with it? Well, they can spend it, they can go on vacation, they can buy gifts, they can take a portion of it and help fund a child's education. There's no limit to who can help. Take advantage of tax-free growth potential. This is huge. Earnings are not taxed while in an account. Tax-free withdrawals for qualified education expenses. Okay, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about many different types of college savings. The biggest one is the 529. So we'll dig into that in a little bit more detail here. Okay? Other ways to save for college include custodial accounts, savings bonds, and the Coverdell. Coverdell is kind of sort of similar to a 529, but it's much more restrictive. It has an annual contribution limit of $2,000, whereas the annual contribution to a 529 is significantly higher. Okay, so a 529. Who can contribute? Well, isn't that nice? Anybody can contribute, all right? So if you have a child and you don't, and you want to contribute to that child's education, you can. It can be a friend. It can be a relative. It can be a grandparent. It can be a cousin, brother, sister, aunt, uncle. Anybody can contribute to somebody's to somebody's 529 plan. And there are very generous contribution guidelines. For instance, a parent wants to contribute to a child's 529 or a grandparent wants to contribute. There is an annual gifting limit of $14,000. The child has 2 parents. Each can contribute up to $14,000 per year. That means the two parents can immediately sock away $28,000 into that child's savings plan. It doesn't have to be the parents. Sometimes the parents are strapped for cash. Maybe the parents have parents themselves who aren't quite so strapped for cash. The point is, you can combine the resources. One of the nice flexibilities of the 529 is that it takes advantage of its tax-free compounding. It has a little function in there that allows a parent or grandparent or anybody who wants to contribute to initiate a 5-year gift. What does that mean? Let's take a step. Grandma wants to contribute $14,000 a year to this child's education, but she has a lump of cash sitting there right now. She could take 5 years of $14,000 gifts, that's $70,000, and put it in right now. What's the benefit of that? Well, it grows tax-free for the next 5 years, starting immediately. So it's a huge advantage. Two grandparents could effectively fund a private college education in one shot. Tax-free savings. I know, the numbers aren't necessarily easy to come up with. The point is the flexibility is there with the 529. Taxes. Big deal. Earnings accumulate tax-free. Contributions may be eligible for state tax deduction or credit, depending on the state, depending on the situation. Withdrawals for qualified expenses are tax-free. Obviously, this is huge, right? So you've put the money into the savings, they've grown tax-free. When you take it out, do you get hit with a tax bill? No. That's the whole point. They never get taxed. If you just take the money and stick it into a piggy bank or into your local savings bank and earn 0.2% per year, each year it gets taxed. You invested in a 529, put it in even a conservative blend of mutual funds that averages something more like 5 or 6% a year, using conservative numbers over the past 120 years, it makes a substantial difference. Okay, so what kind of expenses qualify for tax-free withdrawals? Tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies. When we talk about room and board, it also covers off-campus housing. If the student chooses to live in an apartment, it's deductible up to the equivalent cost of on-campus housing. So if dormitory would cost $3,000 a year, a student can live in an apartment and pay $3,000 a year, and it is just as tax-free. Books and supplies, that includes computers. There are not many colleges that don't have a mandatory computer as part of freshman year entrance. Guess what? Counts as a supply. Control. No, this is nice. It's good to have control over your savings. You can change the beneficiary at any time. If you have multiple students and one of them decides not to go to college, you simply assign the beneficiary to the next student down the line. You can also control the investment options. Especially here in Massachusetts, we have some flexibility. 529s generally are state-sponsored savings plans. The state and an investment company, typically a mutual fund company, design a plan specifically for that state. If your state does not have a specific plan designed with an investment company, you can use any company's plan. That is the case in Massachusetts. Or as I like to say, the world is our oyster. So we have flexibility. In my client base, I have 40 different mutual fund companies' plans in place because it is all a question of what is the best program for the specific client's needs. So there's an awful lot of choices out there. There's an awful lot of information. I suggest sitting down with an advisor to learn your options. Okay, some common college savings questions before I dig in. Do any of you have any questions? Right up in the front.
A couple of questions.
Okay, we'll take one at a time.
What would happen if I only have one child that I'm saving for
Mhm.
and that child decides not to go to college?
Excellent question. All right, the question was, what if the parent only has one child and that child decides not to go to college? You can do any of a number of things. You can gift the savings to somebody else, somebody else's child, to a niece, nephew, somebody else, or you can take the funds out and use them for whatever you need to spend the money on, but it would be subject to a 10% penalty on the growth. It would also be taxable.
All right.
And you had a second question.
And what if you were to, because the 529 is, we currently live in Massachusetts. What
Mhm.
if we picked up a lease in Maine? How would that transfer?
Okay, the question is, and that's a great question, if somebody transferred from one state to another, how would it transfer? The 529 is the parent's asset. And I think in her last presentation, Julie mentioned assets belonging to the family. So because it is an asset that belongs to the family, it is portable with the family. All right? There are no tax consequences, right? Or any other penalties that I know of. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, we had a question in the back? All set there? Yes, sir.
Does Massachusetts offer any tax incentive for 529?
The question is, does Massachusetts offer any specific tax advantages to the 529? Not that I know of, and that is because Massachusetts does not have its own state-sponsored 529. Instead, we have the flexibility of using any 529 plan that's out there. And if I've said something incorrect there, I'm sure one of my counterparts here can help me out just a little bit.
Well, it is, you're correct, in that
Okay.
you can use any, because we don't have any state tax, any additional state tax deduction or credit. But actually, the MIFA does have the state-sponsored 529. So it is.
Program. So there is some incentive.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So a correction from Julie. Thank you very much. So Massachusetts does have an incentive for contributing to a 529 plan.
No, it's just that the U Fund is the
Oh,
Massachusetts
the U Fund plan.
state-sponsored plan.
Got it.
But because there is no additional state tax deduction or credit, you're correct, and that you're open to use any 529 plan. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. Okay.
Just to add to the question that she had, is there an age limit before the beneficiary has to use the funds?
That's another great question. Is there an age limit before the student has to use the funds? Not that I know of. It's for higher education. And there is no age limit on when somebody can attend an institute of higher education.
So you can keep the funds in that person's name indefinitely, and then if they decide not to go to college, but they have your grandchildren somewhere down the line, you can transfer it over to your grandchildren.
Yes, exactly. They are portable.
Could you turn around and say your child decides, nope, forget it, I'm not going to college, turn the beneficiary into yourself and use it for yourself to go back to college?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. If your student decides not to go to college, could the parent instead decide, I'm going to go back to college and I'd like to use these funds? Yes.
And I think one of the other points too to think about with the 529 is even if you find other ways to fund the undergraduate years, graduate financial aid is pretty limited. You might be fortunate enough. I know one young man from Milford who's at graduate school at Boston College and has a job getting his master's, covering that and actually paying a small stipend, tutoring the athletes in the program. There aren't a lot of those jobs, but there are, sometimes a graduate resident assistant sometimes helps cover room and board plus some tuition. So there are some, but not as much aid as at the undergraduate level. And so the 529, if you haven't used it all at the undergraduate, it could very well be helpful as the student, because many of the degrees, especially in the liberal arts area, you really need to go beyond that to a master's or a law degree or whatever the next step is beyond that even. So thinking about starting that to look at graduate work as well, and then I think there's a lot of flexibility in that.
Yes. Excellent point, Senator. Thank you. All right, there are also a few questions that we know are coming. Well, but go ahead. You can ask
One
before
more
we
question, sorry.
go. No, go right ahead.
So now, how would a Roth IRA compare to a 529? Are there benefits to using one over the other?
I think the Roth IRA question is an excellent question, and I am going to specifically address that. Because a lot of folks ask if it would be appropriate to open up a Roth IRA and consider using that for 529 or for college savings. We'll go in. Okay, so first question, and I hear this a lot. may I use my 529 plan funds for a school outside of my state? Well, we live in Massachusetts, so my first question is, why? But yes, you can. Yes, you can. 529 savings can be used at any accredited institution of higher education. And we have lots of them in the United States. And yes, as long as they are an accredited institution, your savings can be used using the exact same guidelines. Second question I hear a lot. If my child decides not to go to college, will I lose the savings in my 529 plan? And obviously the answer to that is no. They can be transferred. They can be used for any of a number of other purposes. If you simply cut bait and do not use them for any type of educational spending, then you do incur a 10% penalty on the growth that you've accumulated. And obviously there would be some taxes on it. Okay. Will investing in a 529 plan lower my child's chance of qualifying for financial aid? Julie, I thought you addressed that one spot on. Okay. Can there be an impact? Yes. The 529 is held as a custodial account in the parents' names generally, sometimes in the grandparents' names, but generally in the parents' name. And so it is not viewed as the student's asset. It is viewed as a family asset, and it has a much lower impact on financial aid. If my child gets a scholarship, will I pay a penalty on my 529 savings? If your child receives a scholarship, congratulations, first and foremost. The wonderful thing about the 529 is if the student receives a scholarship, you can immediately withdraw from the 529 without penalty the amount of the scholarship, the exact amount. So if your student receives a $2,000 scholarship, you can take $2,000 out of the 529 and use. However, the gain, the percentage of that $2,000 that you took out that is growth, will be taxable as income. No penalty, but it will be taxable as income. Does that make sense? Everybody clear? Okay, good. And finally, should I use a Roth IRA to save for college? You'd be amazed at how frequently that question comes up. I'm of the mentality, maybe I'm in the habit of what we would call mental accounting. There's a tool for every purpose. And sometimes a tool intended for one purpose can be used in a pinch for another purpose. But a Roth IRA is intended for retirement. So there are some inflexibilities when it comes to using that for college savings. And the first one is, if you have a Roth IRA, until you reach the age of 59 and a half, any gains that the Roth IRA has achieved over the years would be taxable and would be penalized if they were withdrawn before the age of 59 and a half. However, principal that you put into the Roth could come out penalty-free. Okay? For instance, let's say a parent has put $10,000 into a Roth IRA over the years. That's what they've contributed, and through growth and compounding, the Roth IRA is now worth $15,000. Student goes to college, there's suddenly a tax bill. I mean, a tuition bill. The parent could take as much of that original $10,000 that they put in and use that without taking penalties. However, the parent has just derailed his or her own retirement right now, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, but they don't offer any scholarships for retirement, so I would use that as the last item out of the box. Okay? You also have the advantage in the 529 of accumulating tax-free over the years. The back end of it, the following year you have to fill out your FAFSA. What you took out of the Roth IRA just came out as income. It's not taxable income because Roth is after-tax money, but when you pull it out of the IRA, it is viewed as income. And so it will count against you, okay? So the best is, I always profess, it's good to have, I look at retirement savings and education savings and all the other items that I have in finances in my life as a box full of tools, and I like to have a tool for every specific purpose. I might not have the best hammer in the neighborhood, but I've got a hammer, and its job is to drive the nail into the wall. Right? Okay. In summary, set a realistic college savings goal. Do you intend for your student to go to a public or a private school? Have a feel for it, an idea, because there are vast differences in what you will need to save to cover for both. How much do you want to cover? It's a private matter. You know, everybody has their own way of doing it. I have 4 kids. It's not easy to put 4 through college. I told every one of them the same thing. I will try to save enough to put you through a state school, room and board. If you want to go to a private school, you're going to need some help from outside of Dad. Now, that was just my way of doing it, and I established that early. I told them when they were 6 months so they couldn't come back and hold me against it later. But, but I think it's important to have a goal, and if you're going to have a goal, well then come up with a plan to get you from where I am now to the goal. Financial aid. Well, I think we've had an awful lot of good financial aid discussion here, and we have a whole panel of experts, and that's fantastic. Help from family or friends. Hey, consider every option. Right? You don't know till you ask, and like I said, I don't know, being a grandparent now, I don't know any grandparent that wouldn't do whatever they can to help their grandchildren. Ask. Sometimes they just don't know enough to ask the questions themselves. Develop a strategy, and that strategy, I think the 3 most important parts: start today, invest regularly, and take advantage of any tax-free growth potential that's out there. Do we have any further questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I'm going to return the microphone to the Senator Moore.
Thanks very much. Let me just, a couple of things that I don't think were, maybe were covered, or at least I missed them. On the loans, and then maybe our panel can also talk on that. I think sometimes people will take a commercial loan, and those, I think, are those repaid? You have to start repaying right away, really. So you might have the benefit of the loan, but you're going to have to account for that. The other is that most of the the loans that are through the state or federal, it's usually, I think it's 6 months after graduation, after completion of education. And that's, it's not, if the student leaves school, then it starts then rather than after graduation, because assuming they're not graduating now, they may go back, and sometimes there can be some arrangements. I know of one case where a young man went to a private college first and then was accepted at a national service academy. So he's still going to have the loans from that first year. The academy is a pretty good deal if you want to go into the military or into the naval service or whatever, but we'll still have to, and they initially got a bill from the school saying, you know, you're going to have to start paying, but because he's still in school, that gets deferred off until after graduation. So there's some things about the loan part of it that, obviously, the more you can get in grants and scholarship, the better, but there's only so many of those to go around, and there's usually reasons for them. So it is a factor, but the loans, obviously, it's the ones that are government supported or done through a government agency usually tend to be better. And I think now all of what used to be the federal loans through the banks are now through the colleges themselves, that the college in effect becomes the bank in making those grants. So it's usually done as part of the college financial aid program. So with that, I'm just, if there are any other questions that people have. And if not, I guess what I would say to our cable audience too, that if people have questions, if they would like to email my office, and we'll put the email address on the tagline at the end of the video, so that people could email, and then we'll either get hold of these folks or anyone else that might be able to answer that question and try to get that back to the individuals. So, and that applies to the folks here too. If you have questions after the fact, and I think most of the folks here also have on some of the materials are some email contact information, phone contact. So either contact them directly, or if you don't have it and you can't find it, if you contact my office, we'll track them down and see if we can get an answer for you on it. So I appreciate taking the time to come. I hope this has been helpful to you. There's a lot to absorb, and I think one of the points that all of the speakers made was they all have the websites for the various programs, and those are worth going back and probably actually working with your student, especially if they're getting close to starting to look at colleges, to even go over particularly the financial literacy website, but also the MIFA website and others, and maybe for the parents to look at some of the websites for Edward Jones or some of the other financial advisors that might be operating in the area. Of course, none are probably as qualified as our financial advisor here, but those are, I think, look at all of the different resources that are out there. And I think the other thing would be, if you have any question about the legitimacy of some program that you hear about that sounds too good to be true and probably isn't true, if you want a question, ask us to track that one down too. We're happy to try to do that as well to be helpful. But with that, I thank everybody for your attention. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope that the folks that are watching this at home later on will also find it equally helpful, because I think I learned a lot from it, and hopefully everyone else did too. Thanks very much.